While I was provost at Ithaca College, I thought we should get into sustainability. And so that's when I launched the sustainability initiative back in about 2003 at that point. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that it was really what I wanted to focus on was climate action and the energy transition. That seemed to me to be the most critical part of sustainability. So I stepped down after 5 years and became a senior fellow at a nonprofit think tank in Boston that was advancing sustainability in higher ed. I co-authored a book there on that topic. And then I thought, wow, I really want to do something more concrete. It'd be fun to do something that doesn't just have footnotes. So I said, what can I do here in Ithaca, New York? And that's when I got the idea for the Tompkins County Climate Protection Initiative. Now, clearly, at this point, we're in a climate emergency, and nobody should tell you otherwise. That's where we are. Concentration of atmospheric CO2 reached 424 parts per million this last spring. And it's clear now, based on what scientists are saying, that we actually only have a 50-50 chance to keep global warming from rising more than 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is the target that was set at the UN meetings, COP. I saw a tweet the other day that said 1.5 degrees centigrade is a dead duck. And it was a scientist, a climate scientist. And I thought, wow, that's pretty harsh. But, you know, the UN Secretary General is not pulling his punches either. Just last month at COP28, he said, Earth's vital signs are failing. Humanity's fate is hanging in the balance. Those are pretty unnerving words. So how do we go forward? Well, my argument is that if we're going to get to where we need to go, which is to prevent runaway climate change, we need to work together as co-creators, not as we're told to be by the mainstream culture, competitors or consumers or both. We really have to think about how we engage the world and how we join with others to be co-creators. So what I'm saying here is that we have to move away from the old vertical hierarchy of command and control, and we need to move towards a more horizontal network, a net, so to speak, to connect and collaborate. So when I think about where we need to go, I always think this way is not going to work anymore. We have to go this way. And that was not the Pope blessing you. So we go, in other words, from silos to gardens. And gardens are a great metaphor because they're all about cross-pollination and working together to stay healthy and to stay resilient. So what's the impact of collaboration? Well, I think anyways, it leads to more innovative problem solving. It provides more effective leveraging of what are always finite resources. And I think it creates enhanced resiliency. And in some ways, most important, I think it strengthens community. So that's where I decided to go with TCCPI, the Tompkins County Climate Protection Initiative. So what is TCCPI? Well, it is a multi-sector coalition, collaboration, if you will, of local community leaders and activists. And yes, I think of myself now as an activist, even though I might not have when I first started this. And we're committed to 3 things: reducing greenhouse gas emissions, accelerating the transition to a clean energy recovery, and also strengthening community resilience. we've been very fortunate in that we've been funded by the Park Foundation, it's a local foundation, since 2008. So we've been meeting monthly since 2008. We are going into our 16th year, although it hardly seems possible to me. So here's how it looks. At the center is this collaborative support that we receive from the Park Foundation local sustainability program. And then we are collaborating with various sectors in higher education, Cornell University, Ithaca College, and the Tompkins County Cooperative Extension. We also collaborate with local government, the Tompkins County Legislature, the TC Planning Department, the City of Ithaca, and the towns of Caroline, Dryden, and Ithaca. Another sector that makes up the coalition is the nonprofit sector. And here, folks that are working with us include Sustainable Finger Lakes, PRI, the Museum of the Earth, Finger Lakes Land Trust, Local First Ithaca, and Science Center. Hopefully you recognize some of these. And then in the business finance sector, we have Alternatives Federal Credit Union, Holt Architects, they're the green architecture firm in town, and Tatum Engineers, they're the green engineers. They often work together with Holt on projects. And then a company called MPEC that is focused on providing retrofits, financing retrofits for medium-sized buildings. So we do draw on representatives from each sector to form the steering committee. The steering committee establishes the agenda for our monthly general meetings, as well as the overall strategy of the coalition. We have a website and a Facebook page. We issue an electronic newsletter 6 times a year. And I think our most important project is the annual report on member activities. We're the one place where you can go to find out what are all the different organizations, institutions, and businesses doing to advance our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and accelerating the transition to clean energy and to strengthen community resilience. And that's a document that I think really represents an opportunity for the community to see itself like in a mirror and to recognize what we've accomplished in the past year. I think that's really important with these kinds of efforts, that you do take stock, you stop and say, all right, in the midst of this climate catastrophe, in the midst of this coming apocalypse, what is it that we've done to help mitigate that and to help advance our commitments? So we've had a variety of different projects that we often spin off. There was the Tompkins Energy Conservation Corps, which involved Cornell students going out to Dryden in particular and distributing LED bulbs and pamphlets on how to make your home more energy efficient. There was the EPA Climate Showcase Community Grant that got started at a discussion at one of our monthly meetings. And it was something that I really pushed because it represented the first time that Eco Village at Ithaca was collaborating with the Tompkins County Planning Department to secure this grant that really focused on modeling how green buildings could be built in an affordable way. In recent years, we've been increasingly active in climate and energy policy advocacy at the state level. This is why I now think of myself as an activist. And we evolved in this direction in part because of the passage of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in 2019 that set these very ambitious targets for New York State, some of the most ambitious targets in the United States. And then a climate task force was formed to take a look at those targets and figure out how are we going to get there Bob Howarth here from Cornell was on the task force, and they issued they issued to the public their task force report, which really provided a roadmap then for the state legislature, the General Assembly and State Senate in Albany, to begin putting in place legislative acts that would make sure that we achieve those targets. And so there's been a lot of activity in the last couple of years around this, and I spend hours every week sending emails, writing up memorandums of support, writing letters to the editor, writing op-eds, letting the coalition know when there's an important event that they need to get behind and help advocate. And I think it's borne some pretty significant fruits. So we participate in two statewide coalitions in particular, New York Renews and Renewable Heat Now. And together, all of us working on the one goal last year, we were able to secure the passage of the All-Electric Building Act, which really pushes the state by saying by 2026, all buildings under 8 stories have to be electrified. No more fossil fuel for buildings under 8 stories. That covers most of Ithaca, by the way. Maybe not New York City, but and then in 2029, the buildings over 8 stories come into play. So that's a lot of the work that TCCPI's been doing. But in fact, our flagship program is the Ithaca 2030 district. We're part of a network in the US and Canada that involves 24 cities. Here, the cities together. Quick glance tells you that it's mostly really big cities: Detroit, Pittsburgh, Seattle, San Antonio, San Francisco, Cleveland. We're by far the smallest city in the network. I mean, by far. And it's interesting being part of a network that has so many big cities, because we meet, the directors meet monthly on Zoom, and what I hear going on in some of these other cities just blows me away because of the resources they have, and because of, I mean, they're talking about millions of square feet that they've been able to get committed through working with big real estate development companies. And so I sort of sometimes envy them, but then I think, well, we have a chance to really keep our feet on the ground here and really see in concrete ways the impact that we're having. We're much closer to the scene. And there, you see Burlington is one of the districts as well. That's the one district that I really envy, because the name of their utility in Burlington is the Burlington Electric Department. It's part of city government. Imagine what that's like instead of having to deal with NYSEG, which is one of the worst utilities in the country, I have to say. They're just so, I'm going to be kind and say they're so not forward-leaning. Anyways, what are 2030 districts? Well, the goal is to improve the energy and water performance of commercial and mixed-use buildings. That's what we focus on. We don't deal with residential buildings. It's about taking commercial buildings and mixed-use buildings that are in downtowns and really helping them figure out ways to become more energy efficient and to engage in water conservation measures. We also work on reducing transportation emissions. That really gets focused on commuter emissions in particular, the emissions that people emit going to and from their workplace. We are private sector led, It's a voluntary collaboration. And I think it's one of the few places in the United States where you see the private sector organizing itself in this way. We work with the public sector as well, but it's the private sector that's really in the driver's seat. We believe that it's important to stay based in market realities if you're going to get anything done, and that you have to make the business case for sustainability. And then the really concrete thing that we do is we collect, benchmark, and analyze data to track the progress of these buildings. And so here you see our performance targets for new construction. The goal is to become carbon neutral by 2030 and to reduce water use and transportation emissions by 50%. For existing buildings, and this is where we really focus our attention, and I'll explain why in a second. The goal is to reduce energy by 50%, water use by 50%, and transportation emissions by 50%. It's a lot harder than it looks. It really is. But why are we focusing on buildings? Well, because the built environment accounts for 42% of annual global CO2 emissions, 42%. And of the total emissions, building operations are responsible for about 27% each year. You take the embodied carbon of just 4 building and infrastructure materials, cement, iron, steel, aluminum, that's responsible for another 15%. So that's how you get to 42%, 27 plus 15. Even I can do that math. So the Ithaca 2030 district is part of this larger network. That's the point I want to make here. But we were launched in 2016. And we are the primary vehicle for TCCPI to engage the business community in the effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We made a strategic decision to launch the Ithaca 2030 district as a way to reach out to the business community, because up to that point, our ties were pretty limited. They involved the businesses, the exact businesses you think they would, right? The green engineering firm in town, the green architecture firm in town. So we wanted to reach out beyond that to retail and, offices and professional practices. So our members include building owners, community organizations, government agencies, and professionals. This actually isn't going to mean too much to you if you're not from here, but it's these folks really make the Ithaca 2030 district go for in a way that is I can't describe unless you know these folks, but they're all in really important positions in terms of sustainability and in terms of climate protection. And they're just great to work with. They're all just so committed, and they spend hours every day working to advance climate protection and the energy transition. And they're vastly, vastly underpaid. So how did we get off the ground? Well, we were fortunate in that we received a NYSERDA planning grant in 2015. And as part of that planning grant, we issued a market analysis report, district strategy plan, as well as we developed a public outreach strategy. All those documents were signed, sealed, and approved by NYSERDA, and then we were able to put them up on our website. We then developed a financing guide for building owners and energy efficiency services guide. We then went out and conducted recruitment workshops on the benefits of the 2030 district and introducing building owners to this EPA platform that's offered for free. It's called a Portfolio Manager, where you can upload energy and water data. And believe me, this was a Cornell undergraduate intern who did this. I could not have come close to doing this. She looked at all the data that we could provide and created the energy, water, and transportation baselines for the 2030 district. And at that point, we launched our website. So what are our ongoing activities? Well, we collect monthly energy and quarterly water data. We have the permission of each of the building owners in writing to access their utility accounts on the internet through the NYSEG portal. And so we do that monthly. And then the city provides us with the quarterly water data because that's who does the billing in Ithaca, the Ithaca City Water Department. And then I think one of the most important things we did is we built an online building performance dashboard for each property owner so they could track their progress. And again, this was a Cornell undergraduate engineering student who did this, and it's been Cornell undergraduate engineering students who've worked on refining it and building it out as we move forward each year. It takes Python and combines it with Excel to develop what I think are really attractive dashboards. And each building owner has a link to the dashboard that they can access at any time. But I do meet with each building owner on an annual basis in November and December. And we go over the building dashboards. We see how they did over the past year. And we talk about ways that they can improve their performance. And I always really like those. We do it on Zoom, by the way. And it makes it a lot easier to track these folks down and get them on board to do these reviews. But I always learn so much about each building from talking to the building owners. And I've been doing this for a few years, right? And it always surprises me on what I didn't know about a particular building that when we have these discussions. We also carry out an annual transportation survey to track commuter carbon emissions. We're in the middle of that right now. This is an online survey for folks who are occupants or workers in the buildings. And it takes maybe 3 minutes to fill out. We had to keep it short because we'd never get any kind of response to it. We usually get about a 42 to 43% response rate. That involves a certain amount of nagging on my part, both digital and analog. And as part of our educational mission, we hold quarterly meetings of the district partners where we have folks come to talk about an issue or a challenge that they might need to address and provide some solutions to think about. And then we also publish a quarterly electronic newsletter. And again, I think in some ways, the most important thing that we do, it's the corollary to what we do with TCCPI. We issue an annual district progress report. And in that report, we take all the individual building data, we aggregate it and roll it up to the district level. And I'll show you that in a second. Again, that's Cornell undergraduate engineering students who do that work. I couldn't possibly figure out how to do that. This just illustrates what our onboarding process for new property members is. The basic pitch that we make to prospective district members is the old saw, you can't manage what you don't measure. We talk about the potential of being involved in a network with other building owners and the sense of community that provides. And then, of course, we make it clear that climate action is a really most important part of this whole effort. I'm going through this process right now with 10 buildings that the city decided to bring into the district all at once. It includes 4 fire stations, the police stations, the Green Street Garage, the main office for water and sewer, the main office for physical facilities, the Youth Bureau, a GIAC. City Hall and Southside were already part of that. But that's the largest cohort of buildings that we've taken on at one time. And Joey, who's our intern this year, is about to find out when we meet tonight on Zoom, our weekly meeting, that he's got to figure out how to collect all the energy and water data for these 10 buildings and build the dashboards. And I hope he does that before the end of spring semester and he goes home to North Dakota, where it's really hard to track him down. So this is what Portfolio Manager looks like. And this is just one page. It's a very technical, not necessarily user-friendly platform, but that's where our data goes. And then we're pretty sure that building owners would not spend a lot of time looking at Portfolio Manager. They'd log in, they'd take a look, even though they might have gone through a training session, and they'll just go, oh my God, I don't have time for this. So we decided to do something that was more visually attractive, that really boiled down the essential data for them to look at and to figure out where they were. This is Tatum Engineering's energy dashboard. There's also a water dashboard. I have written permission from Tatum to share the dashboard. And if you look at the bar graph at the lower right for energy use intensity targets, energy use is simply the amount of energy you consume divided by the square feet of the building. And you can see the light line at the bottom is the 2030 target, 50% reduction in energy use below the baseline. And as you can see, in the last 2 years, they've been well below that 2030 line. So why not share that with the public? They've been terrific to work with, and they use their office building as basically as a laboratory to try out different technologies and to see what kind of difference they could make. I'm not going to walk you through this. It's just to show you that we do have a variety of different databases that we use to determine the building baselines, and in terms of the regional baseline, and for energy, the local baseline for water, and the local baseline for transportation. I look at that and my eyes just glaze over, but my interns look at that and go, yes. This is the boundaries of the 2030 district. We drew these boundaries this way because it really does encompass at least 90% of the commercial buildings in Ithaca. And you can see the inset. We have a lot of buildings in and around the commons. So last year's intern figured out how to do this cool inset, which this is the kind of thing I get excited about. Geez, Michael, you can do an inset for the district map? Wow. And again, it's not something I could do. So currently, we have 931,974 square feet committed. I'm really eager to hit the 1 million mark, but we couldn't have even gotten this close without the 10 buildings that the city just brought in. We have 56 buildings and 31 property members. This is the distribution of building types at the end of 2022. We haven't calculated what that is going to look like for 2023 yet. But as you can see, not surprisingly, offices make up the majority, and then mixed use buildings. Mixed use buildings are simply, you have retail or a restaurant on the bottom floor, and then the next 2 or 3 floors are apartments or offices or both. These are our current property members. I'm just listing them here. If you, and again, if you were a resident all year round resident, you would recognize some of these are the most iconic businesses and buildings in Ithaca. And we're really, really privileged to have them on board with us. And so, you know, we work on growing each year. I like to do it a little bit more incrementally than having a dump truck pull up and say, here are 10 new buildings from the city for you for 324,000 square feet. But, you know, although it was a shock at first, then, you know, I started to get very excited. I'm not sure how Joey's going to respond when we talk tonight. The good news is that, you know, and I'm talking about our last annual report, we reduced our energy consumption by 27% from the district baseline in 2022. In addition, we used 40% less water, and those were really great numbers. They're scary to me, though, because I don't know what 2023 is going to look like. We're collecting all those numbers now and analyzing them. I hope we can do at least as well. Where we've had the most difficulty, and it's really the hardest nut to crack by far, is get improvement in commuter emissions. We did have a slight improvement in 2022. It was a 16% reduction from the 2021, which was very high, and it was significantly below the 2019 emissions level. The 1 year where we met the 2020 target for commuter emissions was 2020. And it's pretty easy to figure out why. Most people were not commuting into work for several months that year. And just to give you a sense of the growth that we've experienced just since the end of 2022, we've had a 54% increase in committed square footage. Here's what the energy results from 2022 look like. What you see there, the gray line, that's the baseline for the district. We calculated that as a weighted means of the individual buildings' energy baselines. So the baseline in 2022 was 104. What was the actual performance? Well, we hit 76. I was really excited about that because that not only put us well beyond the 2020 target, it actually gets us halfway to the 2025 target of 68. And that's at the end of 2022. So we have at least 2 or 3 years, depending on how you want to do the math, to get to 2025 target. So we felt really good about how we did with energy. Of course, there's always the question of, well, so what? You know, what difference are we making? And the so what question, this is a little bit of a digression, but I've always thought of the so what connection as the goat herder question. My grandfather was a goat herder in the Alps, and he came to this country and worked in a factory all his life. And, you know, for him, it was like, so what? You know, what difference does it make what you're doing? And so it's something I've thought about a lot since then. But what you see here is that in 2022, 23 of the property members met or nearly met the 2020 target of a 20% reduction from their building baselines. And of the buildings that met the 2030 target, there were 13. So it was a really terrific performance. The blue line sort of separates out the good guys from the bad guys. The bad boys are the orange. You can see they're, you know, having some difficulty. But I always felt like if all we did was go out and gather up the best performing buildings in the city, it was disingenuous because it wasn't going to represent the range of buildings that we actually have in the city. So I'm actually kind of fond of the bad boys because, the really big, important priority is for the 2030 district to meet its district targets. So we're going to have underperforming buildings. We're going to have better performing buildings. We're going to have outstanding performing buildings. But what really matters is what does that all add up to in the end when we calculate the district EUI? And so that's how the energy spread looks. In terms of what difference we're making, we avoided $211,000 last in 2022. We avoided 194,000 pounds of CO2e, and that's the equivalent of over 15,000 young trees getting planted. Then there's the water update. In 2022, our district baseline calculated as the weighted means of the individual buildings was 22. That's the gray bar again on the left. What was the actual performance? Well, at the district level, we achieved a WEUI of a little over 13. So we definitely beat the 2020 target. We even beat the 2025 target. We had a reduction of 40% from the baseline. And so we're well within striking distance of the 2030 target of 11. And again, so what? Well, as you can see here, 25 properties met the 2020 target of 20% reduction from their building baselines, and 22 of those buildings met their 2030 targets. So we're really doing well when it comes to water. Now, that is, yeah, sure. That is after the pandemic. So people were like back in their offices or in the stores. We saved $184,000, 7.3 million gallons, and that's 423,000 showers, based on how the EPA calculates these things. Transportation, as I said, was a really tough nut. We did get an improvement, as I said, in 2022, but we're still well above the 2020 target. On the other hand, we did have a significant reduction from the 2021 emissions. And here's a lot of detail here that you might take a look at later. But I was really interested in seeing how community changed over the period from 2020, when a lot of things got shut down, and then in the next 2 years, as people started going back to work. What percentage of folks remained home and became remote workers? What percentage of folks were just coming in alone because they were concerned about getting exposed to COVID? And what you see is that as we got past 2020, we slipped into some old habits, unfortunately. So what's our relationship to the Green New Deal? And this is, where we're going to wrap up. The city's committed, I hope you know, to achieving community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. The Ithaca Energy Code Supplement, it's called, that was signed into law, that was passed into law by the Common Council. Also, and this was before the state building electrification law, said that all buildings had to be carbon neutral by 2026 and couldn't use fossil fuels. So we actually paved the way for building electrification at the state level, which we like to think. And here's a nice quote from Director of Sustainability, Rebecca Evans, who does a yeoman's work in that office. She finally got an assistant this year, so she might be able to dig out under the amazing workload that she has. And I wanted to end on this quote because it really drives my thinking and how I try to go through each day. I always told my students in my history courses, the goal is to not just be an object of history. The really important thing is to learn how to become a subject in history, how to be a change agent. And I think you could only do that if you get the insight here that Thomas Berry's offering us, that the universe is a communion of subjects and not a collection of objects. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Peter. I'd like to open it up to questions for just a few minutes. Questions from anyone for Peter?
Yeah. It's for the Zoom audience. Sorry. Oh, the Zoom. Sorry.
So I feel like generally it's hard in the short term to switch to more sustainable habits. It's more like costly, even if it isn't in the long term. I was wondering if there's anything that the initiative does to incentivize building owners to be more sustainable and to lower their emissions, like subsidies for more costly parts of it.
We don't have the resources to do that on our own, but we certainly make the building owners aware of, for example, of all of the incentives and dollars that are available through the IRA, so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which is actually a Climate Protection Act. And it provides all kinds of incentives for building owners to move toward heat pumps, to move towards insulating their envelopes, and to think about on-site solar. We also get the word out about the various community solar projects that are available for building owners to participate in, and encourage them to look into those as well.
We have time for one more question, and it's online.
Thanks. There's a question from Zoom from Bethany Mays, who says, hello. Ithaca's new energy code supplement is exactly the progressive change we need. One of the largest building owners in Ithaca is Cornell University. Has Cornell been an early adopter of these progressive building standards?
Well, honestly, Cornell's pushing back on those standards and saying that they should be, I bet you've heard this before, a special case. And so there's a lot of back and forth going on right now, a lot of negotiating going on. And it's not clear to me where that's going to land. But at the very least, we've drawn a line for Cornell and said, here's where you really need to step up to. And you can talk about all the reasons why you should be a special case, but here's where we really want you to go.